Good morning, UHCL. Welcome to the first Sports Talk podcast for the fall 2018 semester. I'm Joe Riley. I'm your moderator for this morning, and I have three special guests with me. If y'all like to introduce yourselves.
My name is Katherine Rodriguez, and I'm the audience engagement editor here at The Signal.
Hello, everybody. I'm Troylon Griffin II, and I'm the co-managing editor of The Signal.
What's up, everyone? I'm Justin Murphy, and I'm the other co-managing editor for The Signal.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you all very much for being here with me today to discuss some of these interesting topics in sports. So today we're going to talk about basically it's going to be three hot topics and three stories that might seem kind of bizarre or interesting or fascinating, whichever you prefer. So we're going to talk about Urban Meyer mishandling his head coach's domestic violence allegations, the controversy at the U.S. Open between Serena Williams and the chair umpire. We'll also be discussing Louisville head coach Rick Pitino's new book, and we'll also be talking about more interesting topics such as Bills cornerback Vontae Davis retiring during halftime of a game during week 2, the LA Clippers hiring a writer to work in their front office, and a new book detailing Bill Belichick's life. So let's start with Urban Meyer, because this story I feel is kind of interesting, to say the least. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows the story by now that Urban Meyer has admitted to mishandling the situation with his assistant coach, Zach Smith. So he admitted in an exclusive interview with ESPN back on September 16th that he mishandled the situation involving Smith. Smith had been accused of domestic violence in 2009 as well as 2015. Meyer did not discipline or fire Smith, claiming he was trying to help stabilize the situation. Meyer was then suspended from coaching for the first 3 games of the season for not notifying athletic director Gene Smith of Zach Smith's legal history. So, the first question I have for you guys is, do you believe that Urban Meyer was too late in admitting that he mishandled the situation, and what are your general thoughts?
Well, I mean, my boyfriend and I were talking about this over the weekend because he's a huge Ohio State fan. And when Ohio State got Urban Meyer, he came from Florida State. It was a big win for the team. They had really high expectations, and now that the season was about to start, all this blew up. I think, what my boyfriend was saying, it was kind of defending. I don't want to say defending, but he was saying that Urban Meyer was not a law enforcement agency, and that at the time, whenever Smith was first accused, there was an investigation going on. Nevertheless, that investigation ended in nothing, so that therefore he should not have taken any actions, I guess, against him, or he should not have punished him because the law enforcement didn't do. Now I would say that it's kind of late for him to be admitting this now. He took a big job with a big team, the 4th team in the nation, so obviously it's going to cause a lot of controversy among fans.
I kind of agree with that for the most part, that, I think that he is a little too late in admitting that he mishandled the situation. Obviously he did. And the situation itself, I do think maybe he could have, addressed it a bit better. But honestly, when we look at, the sports industry or many other industries for that matter, sometimes we see that, the higher officials, they might not address the situation the way they should if it means, winning the game or just being successful and all. So, yeah.
I think it's interesting because this is a situation that involves a coach and a coaching staff. If it was, let's say, a player from Ohio State was caught smoking weed, there would be a punishment that's like, bam, this is what has to happen, because there's a set rule within college football for that. But there's not really a set rule for players for domestic violence or for coaches for domestic violence. So I don't know how he should have handled this per se, but I definitely think that it originally saying that he didn't because if I remember correctly, he came out and said, "Oh, I had no idea about this," and then he's like, "Oh yeah, I knew." So like it kind of just gives me like that impression of like, what should I believe and should I ever trust you again?
And I can guarantee you, going back to what you were saying, that if it's kind of interesting that you pointed out that there's no laws really for domestic violence, but if it was a player who would have committed this, or if the allegations were against the player, I can guarantee you that something like would have been done at the time to resolve the issue and, you know, stop further controversy. But the fact that it was a coach makes it even more important for them to handle the situation correctly, and they didn't, and he did it. So, I mean, he was suspended for the first 3 games of the season. Myers was, because he didn't know how to handle it, whatever. But I think that's something else, you know, should have done at the time.
Okay, so then my second question for you guys would be, do you believe Urban Meyer should have received a stiffer punishment? Do you think he should have been suspended for longer, or maybe even lost his job? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that honestly, you know, this is one of those cases where because he didn't do anything, because he kind of did just be a bystander in all of it, that maybe there is a greater punishment that could have been done. Because I mean, it basically is in a way like a cover-up. And, you know, whenever there is something like that, there has to kind of be punishment for it. So maybe the suspension could have lasted a bit longer, maybe.
I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with that, because at the same time, it was not him who committed this, you know.
True.
It's not necessarily him. So I don't know.
It's a really weird situation.
Yeah, I know. Because, I mean, if it was any other crime, like drug-related issue or whatever, felony, misdemeanor, I mean, but like we were saying, there's so, like, little laws that protect domestic violence that I don't know. But I don't know. It's confusing.
It kind of just calls back to the whole idea of, you know, how accountable should a bystander be held for something they could have intervened in, and you know, unless we can figure out the answer to that question, it's hard to say exactly how this question should be answered.
That's what I was gonna say.
What do you think, Joe?
Bystander intervention.
I do think it's interesting for sure. Like, I'm glad that he did get some punishment. At the same time, I'm not really sure that the punishment fit the crime in this case. I mean, if you even want to call it a crime, I personally would, because I consider domestic violence basically a crime against humanity. So I felt maybe he should have got more games. It's interesting to me because at first I thought he was going to be fired, and I thought, you know, he probably should be fired because the university has to send a strong message. But at the same time, I'm not all that surprised that he only got 3 games, because when you're as successful as he's been, and when he's been doing it for so long, and you have won a national championship for that university, and you bring in so much money for that university, of course, you know, that's going to be a very heavy factor into that decision. So, but I think maybe he should have been suspended probably half the season, but that's neither here or there. At this point, you know, the damage has been done. What's been decided has been decided, and he's back coaching now. So let's move on to the U.S. Open's tennis final on the women's side. So everybody knows, y'all watched it, right? Mm-hmm. Y'all saw what happened between Serena Williams and chair umpire Carlos Ramos. So now chair umpires all across tennis, they're angered, for the lack of a better term, over the lack of support that Ramos has been given following his dispute with Serena during the finals of the U.S. Open. They're actually considering now starting a union and boycotting future matches involving Serena Williams, which might sound a bit extreme, but that's just what they're considering right now. So what do you guys think of these chair umpires threatening to boycott these matches?
I think that's ridiculous. I'm
to
sorry.
say the least.
I mean, yeah. Obviously, Serena Williams just lost control there completely. She called him a thief. She threw the racket. She just did a whole show. This is not the first time that she's involved in, you know, something like that in court. But threatening to boycott one of the best tennis players of the world, It's not a smart decision. I don't think so.
I think Williams kind of just had a blow up because of everything that had been happening. Like, she wasn't allowed to wear her bodysuit that she had made for medical purposes. I think it was for clots or something like that. And because the contest official or whoever runs it just wasn't a fan of it, and so she couldn't wear that. And then this happened where she thought she had been robbed, and she called him a thief and all this stuff. I think it was just like a boiling point. But I think that threatening to boycott matches that Williams is in is stupid, because she's going to be in every high profile contest, because she is, like Kay said, probably the greatest women's tennis player in the world.
Yeah, I mean, plus, I guess, for the most part, she's considered a really great person and everything, and for her to have one outburst like this, I mean, it's kind of understandable. Like Justin just said, she has been going through quite a bit, and in a way, her outbursts were kind of reasonable, to say the least. So I personally feel like, it'd be overboard for them to want to boycott future matches involving her. I mean, come on. All players eventually have some kind of outburst, or even just the idea of boasting and stuff like that. This is sports. It's competition. Like, sometimes people have a certain way of feeling about the game.
Another thing is a lot of people were saying that Ramos basically took the spotlight off of the lady who eventually won. I forget who it was at the top of
Naomi Osaka.
Yeah, he took the spotlight off of her, because now the story wasn't about the fact that she beat one of the greatest tennis players in the world. It was the fact that Serena Williams was robbed.
Yeah. I mean, I felt really bad for Naomi Osaka, the 20-year-old Japanese-born tennis player that defeated Serena Williams for the U.S. Open Championship. I mean, because number one, it's her first major championship, and two, she defeated one of the GOATs of the game in Serena Williams. But if you look at Ramos's history, I mean, because I actually looked this up, and it really isn't all that surprising, because Serena's sister Venus has had issues with him, where she had a dispute with him, but he also has had issues with male tennis players such as Andy Murray and Rafael Nadal, just to name a couple. So it's not really all that surprising, but it's just a really bad deal all around. Although I do have to say, I really liked and respected the fact that Serena was asking fans to stop booing, and she took the time to console Osaka and try to let her have her moment. So at least she was trying to make up for the situation at that moment in time.
What I would say is that she needs to learn how to calm down in the future, because this cannot repeat, especially something so big as the U.S. Open. I read last week that she's not going to the China Open. She stepped back. So it's just learning how to control the temper, I guess. You win and you lose, no matter who you are. If Nadal loses, I can guarantee he's not going to lose his mind like that.
Yeah. So I think, are we all in agreement that it's ridiculous for him to consider forming a union?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it all unanimous?
Unanimous.
Okay. So let's move on to the world of college basketball, which is a very sullied area of sports these days for a variety of different reasons. So former Louisville men's basketball coach Rick Pitino recently stated in an interview that his coaching career is over. He basically confirmed this while he was at ESPN promoting his book called Pitino, My Story. Pitino was fired after an FBI investigation into corruption in college basketball, and especially within his own program, with the alleged arrangements for his players to have parties with strippers being one of the big infractions. He's denied any wrongdoing and having any knowledge of these activities, and he's even suing the University of Louisville for wrongful termination. So what I want to know is, do you think his alleged wrongdoings overshadow his Hall of Fame accomplishments?
Number one, was there an investigation, or?
There was an investigation into his program, as far as a 5-star recruit getting like impermissible benefits, to secure his commitment to the university.
I also read that they were using like sponsors' money to like try recruits to attend the school. So I mean, my question is, what did the investigation conclude in? Because if he's suing the university for wrongful termination, then I'm assuming the guy's innocent. Otherwise, that's a felony. So I wouldn't necessarily think that it overshadows his accomplishments.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it overshadows his accomplishment either. I mean, it could definitely cast maybe a minor or significant size shadow, but I wouldn't say it would overshadow it. I think it's all about, if they end up determining that this really is something that he is actually guilty of and all. If he ends up being innocent of it, then it'll just seem like a little dent in his career. But if he is guilty, well, then it does have the potential to possibly mess up his career.
There's been quite a few scandals in college sports with like people getting paid and not knowing that they're getting paid, like especially in college basketball. Like I forget who it was, but it was someone from like Arizona or UCLA or something, and they were like, "Oh, we getting paid, like we're getting our money," whether they went on record saying that or not, I'm not 100% sure of, but I know that people have come out and said that they've gotten paid, or sources have come out and said that they know that some college basketball players are getting paid and are getting like these extra amounts of money, or like you said, like trips to go to a strip club so that they could try to get them to come to their university. It's happening all over. It's just, is the NCAA actually going to do something about it?
Yeah. I remember the allegations as far as like the strip club parties actually were brought about in a book written by this lady who was supposedly the queen of of strippers or whatever you want to call it, and she basically had alleged that. So that's really where that came from, and I think maybe there is a chance that Patino is innocent in some of this. But we also, I think, should also take into account that he's had scandals before, like having extramarital affairs and things of that nature. So that could also make you think a little bit more about his guilt or innocence in this matter. But do y'all believe that he's innocent in any of this?
Believing, I don't know. That's a tough question. It's really tough to determine because we don't know that, even if it happened or it didn't happen or how it happened or the circumstances.
True. The situation does seem like, it seemed like a situation where I could honestly see if he was guilty and all, but we don't know for sure, so I don't want to make like any wrong judgments. But considering, like Justin said, this isn't necessarily an uncommon thing in the industry, I could see it being that he's guilty.
Okay, so that does it for the hot topics. Let's move on to a little segment that I like to call, well, that's interesting. Oh, we have another special guest with us today. Yeah, please forgive him. It's been raining, so it set him a little bit behind. Come on in. Please, introduce yourself.
Hi, how are you? My name is Saketh Kambhampati. I am a business major, and I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome, welcome.
Hello.
Yes. I understand that you're in a new student organization known as BOSS. So
Yes.
Give us a brief description of that if you like.
Sure, so BOSS stands for Business Oriented Student Society. It was started by my good friend Tree Nguyen, who is in a bunch of other organizations as well. He is one of the student government officers. He's the vice president. And basically we cater to all kinds of majors, specifically business majors. We do internships, we do networking, we do academic support for students who want to further their resume and their academic career. And it's a great way to meet new people who are very business oriented, and just a great way to make some memories and basically build your resume.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. Well, thanks for coming, Saketh. We're very happy to have you. You're just in time. We're actually going to talk about sports stories that kind of make you scratch your head and wonder about the state of the sports world a little bit, if you will. So, first, let's discuss probably the weirdest sports story to come along within the last few weeks. Buffalo Bills cornerback Vontae Davis pulled himself out of the team's Week 2 game against the Los Angeles Chargers. He left the stadium during halftime of the game and announced his retirement from the NFL. And so basically, apparently he did not let any of his teammates know. He let a couple of his coaches know, and that's where his teammates got their information. This was one of the most bizarre things that I think I've ever heard. So, I don't know. What do you guys think of this? Like, what do you think of the act itself? What do you think of the timing?
I don't know. I just woke up one day and be like, I'm going to retire today. No longer going to play, but I'm going to do it in the middle of the game. Like, what?
It seems like he's channeling, I forget his name, so I think it's Michael Strahan, who, was on the talk show and everything, and how he just abruptly decided he was going to leave, and he didn't tell anyone about it. I mean, it's funny because he was a football player, too. Like, I think that's just kind of reminds me of that, only this happened actually in football and stuff. So, wonder what was going through his head.
It reminds me of Tom Herman when he was at UH, our sister school UH, and they had a bowl game, and there were talks of him going to UT to coach there, and his players asked him right before the game, and he's like, "Nah, I'm not going anywhere. Like, I'm staying here, and I'm riding out." And then they won the game, and then it felt like 2 or 3 days later, he was hired at UT, and then just left. So that's kind of, and then I also just want to point out that there have been a lot of solid memes made out of this whole situation.
Yeah.
So, like when Vance McDonald stiff-armed the mess out of Chris Conte last week on Monday Night Football, someone went on Facebook and was like, Chris Conte is the second person in NFL history to retire at halftime this season.
That was one of the best memes that I had ever seen, like ever. And I've seen a lot of great ones. I don't know, Saketh, what do you think about this?
Yeah, actually, this kind of reminds me of the NBA Finals. I think it was 2015 or 2016 with Cavs and the Warriors. And I remember one of the final games. It was either Game 5 or Game 6. Stephen Curry was so upset with the play that he threw his mouth guard at one of the fans in the crowd, and he was just going on this temper tantrum, and then he apologized, but later on he was kicked out and he couldn't play for the next game, and he returned for the final game. And I don't know, it was just, it's gotta learn good sportsmanship, at times, that's my feel. But yeah, definitely, man, it's crazy.
Yeah, Steph definitely has a penchant for taking his mouthpiece out and tossing it at somebody. I remember they played a game in Memphis. I don't know, either last season or the season before that. He thought he was fouled. He didn't get the call. He got really upset, so he took his mouthpiece out and he threw it at the referees. But, Justin, it's interesting that you mentioned the Tom Herman scenario, because it makes me think of when Nick Saban was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. And he kept saying over and over again that he wasn't going to Alabama to be the head coach, because there were talks about that. He's like, how many times do I have to say it? I'm not going to Alabama. And then, like, about a few days after the season was over, sure enough, he was at Alabama. So,
and look what he's done now.
Yep. He's probably the greatest head coach in the history of college football. He's got like 1 million championships, so I guess it's okay. But yeah, I think for me, it's just the timing of it all. Like, I understand it because he actually explained what was going on, and I can understand it from the standpoint of you want to make sure you're healthy for your family for the rest of your life, and it's dawning on you that maybe you shouldn't be playing anymore. But at the same time, I can't help but be sketchy about the idea that it just hits you during halftime of the second game of the season. And you had just signed a contract with them in the off season, so you've clearly been thinking about this for a while. So while I understand his reasoning, I just don't understand the timing. So let's move on to another interesting story. I don't know if this is going to start a trend or anything, but the Los Angeles Clippers, they hired Sports Illustrated lead NBA writer Lee Jenkins in their newly created position of Executive Director of Research and Identity. So this is the role that was recently created by the Clippers. And by the way, I'm sure you don't need me to point this out, but Jenkins has no NBA front office experience at all. So What is your take on this?
What exactly is Executive Director of Research and Identity?
Exactly what it sounds like.
Yes.
So kind of finding like, I'm assuming it's going to create, or it's going to like merge together like marketing with like analytics and also like how the team is portrayed and like how the image is supposed to be seen.
Yeah. And I know from what I've read, the expectation seems to be that he'll spend time with potential draft picks and getting to know them and basically like doing some research through his interactions with them and reporting those back to the team. So basically they're counting on him using his research abilities from his career as a writer and translating that into a front office position.
Reminds me of when in baseball, the St. Louis Cardinals and the Houston Astros both started this whole analytics thing where they brought in like Jeff Lunau, and he was the Cardinals GM for a while, and he's just he describes himself as like a nerd and coming into a front office never having played professional baseball in his life, but having seen these high analytics. So this is a different situation with the Clippers, and this is a writer, but I'm sure he has a whole different skill set that is completely different from what they're usually seeing, so maybe that'll help him out.
I think this is more about kind of like developing and maintaining the identity of the team more than just, doing analytics and research. I think they're truly hiring this person to build up the identity of the team and make sure that every single pick that they do in the future, reflects that identity that they've been trying to work on. I guess that's kind of weird. I don't know.
I think it's experimental, but it's a good kind of move. Because personally, I do think that despite him not having any NBA front office experience, it's always good to bring people who aren't in the environment because it brings a whole new perspective to things like that. And if he is a writer, he clearly must know a lot about the team and stuff like that. So in a way, it's kind of like if, people who were making a movie brought in a fan of that movie and they wanted to see how they could make the sequel better. So I think that he could really be a good way of helping, the team themselves have a good perspective on themselves, and he can just bring this whole new idea to them about how they can approach things.
Okay. Yeah, I think another thing, just to elaborate on that, I think the fact that I guess you could look at it as like a motivational experience for him, because as the great entrepreneur Richard Branson once said, if someone offers you something and if you have no experience on it, say yes and then learn how to do it later. So I think he's following that principle very, very carefully. And as far as writing for this team and being part of the executive director of research and identity and having no NBA front office experience, I think, just like you said, he's just trying to probably gain a new perspective on the team. That's kind of my feel for it.
Yeah. And I think it's also interesting to point out too that the Los Angeles Lakers, they hired Rob Pelinka into their front office, and Pelinka has been an agent and doesn't really have any NBA front office experience. So who knows? Maybe this will start a trend of people who don't have prior NBA experience being hired into those positions. Okay, so real quickly, our last topic. So ESPN NewYork.com's Ian O'Connor wrote a book detailing New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick's life, titled Belichick, the Making of the Greatest Football Coach of All Time. And in the book, he states that star quarterback Tom Brady was so upset with Belichick that he actually contemplated not even returning to the team for the 2018 season. So based on interviews with 350 people, including some close to Brady, like friends and relatives, he was worried about being pushed out of the organization by Belichick. And the book also features interesting details about the scandals involving Spygate and Deflategate, among other things. So this seems really bizarre.
Oh, this is 100% true. I'm a big conspiracy theorist about Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots organization. Real quickly, I saw this interview with Stephen A. Smith, or someone was talking about it. It might have been Shannon Sharp now that I think about it, but it was one of those morning talk shows, and they were saying when Jimmy Garoppolo got traded for like a 5th round pick or a 4th round pick or whatever it was, and that was it, and then he went off because Tom Brady went to Robert Kraft the owner of the Patriots and said, either you trade Garoppolo or I'm out the door. And Robert Kraft loved Tom Brady so much, obviously, because he's probably the greatest quarterback of all time, or most winningest quarterback of all time. So that kind of just plants that seed of like Bill Belichick wanted to show that it wasn't Tom Brady, it was him that created this dynasty in New England, and it wasn't just Tom Brady, and he wanted to show that by winning with Jimmy Garoppolo maybe. And so I'm a big believer that Tom Brady and Bill Belichick are not 100% friends anymore, and that they just kind of work together because they know that they have to, and all this stuff. So yeah,
I agree with Justin on that. Like, I'm a firm believer in, whatever might be going on behind the scenes is kind of likely most of the time. I firmly believe that, there can always be riggings, corruptions, or anything like that when it comes to these kind of things. So I could see this being pretty true and all.
Yeah, I think mainly it's because of the declaration in the media. We see Tom Brady and Bill Belichick as they're great friends. They've been at it for many years, and Bill has supported him throughout his entire football career. And the fact that we're hearing about this now, it shows we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. And as they said, we don't know what really goes on behind how Bill is managing Tom, and how even though Tom is at the top of his game right now, he's the GOAT, he's the greatest of all time. We don't know if those two have a good relationship or not. And maybe the thing is, he said that he might retire, he might not play next year, but I think he's definitely secured his title. So I think maybe it's time that he pushes for maybe retiring after this season. I don't know.
Okay. But yeah, I totally agree with all that, and I think it's also interesting to point out the situation with Brady's personal trainer and good friend Alex Guerrero basically being banned from the team, and so I'm sure that also did not do Belichick any favors in his relationship with Brady, although I'm sure he could care less about that because he just cares about winning each game and getting back to the Super Bowl, and which is his job, really. But I just think this book, for really hardcore football fans, and even if you're not a hardcore football fan, might be an interesting read. Well, that does it for Sports Talk for today. I'd like to thank all of my panelists for being here today. Thank you so much. I know some of us had an uphill battle getting here because, Mother Nature has been rearing her ugly head as of late, but appreciate you taking the time to be here today. And be sure to look out for Sports Talk in the future. Until next time, go Hawks!